A lot of times we work with companies that within visibility, they may have, and this is a natural part of the way companies grow, is business owners have grown and they've hit a problem where they've needed to add a new part of their business, add a new process, add a new team, and they need something to help organize that team. So maybe they build an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe they buy a new tool, and they wake up one day and they realize, I've got 10 different tools running my business. And to get the answer of how is my business running from A to Z, it takes my team a week to put the answer together. They don't have clear visibility at a glance on how their business is running.
This podcast is brought to you by Fast Slow Motion, a team of expert consultants that have helped hundreds of growing businesses build scalable systems on the HubSpot and Salesforce platforms. To learn more, visit fastslowmotion.com.
Welcome to the Fast Slow Motion podcast, where we teach you how to build a business you love while enjoying your life. I'm your host, Sam Donaghy. In today's episode, we're joined by Fast Slow Motion's Director of Growth, Michael Johnson. Michael, it's so good to see you today.
Sam, it's great to be here again. Second time. Excited to be invited back. I'm glad I didn't ruin things the first time.
Well, Michael, growing a business is not easy, right? In fact, growth is really hard for companies to achieve. Scaling a business requires the proper strategy. It doesn't matter if you're a startup or a publicly traded company. The challenge remains the same: to scale the business. And you've had the opportunity to help hundreds of business leaders scale their businesses. And it doesn't just happen by accident for the most part. There's a process. You need to be intentional. You need to have foresight. And most importantly, you need to be able to execute on the strategy. So in today's episode, you're going to be unpacking the Scalable Business Framework. And you're going to be helping people to systematically scale their business. So firstly, how did you come up with the concept of the Scalable Business Framework?
Sam, that's a great question. What we do at Fast Slow Motion is really help businesses build systems, scalable systems to scale their business, to grow their business. And thinking about our process and the things we do and the things we help people with over, like you said, hundreds of clients, the Scalable Business Framework is really the distillation of that process that we do every day. And the concepts that we think about without even consciously really thinking about them as concepts in order to set businesses up to scale and grow. It's, like I said, it's an observation of across several hundred clients. And it really comes down to three core principles that we found after working with hundreds of clients. And it's a scalable business has three things in place. They have processes, they have automation, and they have visibility. Processes, automation, and visibility. So those three core components are the Scalable Business Framework. And what makes it scalable is that, like everything we do at Fast Slow Motion, is it's iterative. We use that visibility principle to understand our progress and what we're learning. And that goes back into the processes to adjust them and then continue the scalable portion. And so we're always learning, we're always iterating across our processes, we're automating, we're checking out the results through visibility, internal and external, and we're making adjustments. And that lets it scale. One of the things the analogies that I use all the time for the Scalable Business Framework is the human body. Within our body, we have multiple systems. The first is the musculoskeletal system, like your muscles and your bones. This is like processes in a business. Without your bones and your muscles, you couldn't really do anything as a human. You couldn't go out and go to the store, much less work or do anything. So you'd be an amoeba. And it's same with a business. If you didn't have solid processes, you couldn't function as a business. There's no chance you would even have a chance to grow and scale. The next, with automation, that's similar to the autonomic nervous system. And so this is the part of the body that controls your respiratory rate, your heart rate, your breathing, your digestion. They're critical functions in your body, but you don't think about them.
They're on autopilot.
Yeah, you're on autopilot. And that's the beauty of the system, is that these things are needed for survival. But you and I are sitting here and I'm not thinking about the breakfast smoothie I just had and I'm digesting it. Yeah. And if I was, I couldn't really have this conversation. But a lot of times in business, we work with clients all the time that these critical functions for their business are not automated.
Right.
They're thinking through these critical things they have to do as a business, consciously going through them every day. And so what happens? They can't function at a higher level. They can't
Right.
achieve higher order tasks. And their people are really stuck working on things that are highly repetitive, critical functions, but things that could potentially be automated. So you've got the processes as the foundation of your musculoskeletal system. You've got your automation as your autonomic nervous system. And then visibility, that's your senses. That's your five senses, your taste, touch, smell, all that. That's the ability to see the external world, internal world, make adjustments. I touched a hot stove, I'm going to move my hand.
Right.
The same with the business. We can look external data, internal data, get results, and then based on that, we adjust our process. That's what makes it iterative. That's what makes it scalable. And that's what makes it a powerful model within the Scalable Business Framework.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful analogy to use, really, because you can visualize it, particularly for a layman. But yeah, thank you so much for that definition of the framework. So could you give us some examples that you've commonly seen where a business has one or more deficits of the three principles that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to really point out about the model is if you have a deficit in processes, if you have a deficit in automation or visibility, you're going to essentially stunt your ability to grow. And the model is a really good way to look at a business analytically, like through a lens, and see how am I shortcutting myself, or how am I setting myself back from growing? And we work with businesses frequently. They come to us and maybe they don't have their processes well defined. They don't have very prescriptive processes. They're afraid of being what they would say is too rigid because they want to give their employees freedom. And what they don't realize is that by giving their employees a defined process, giving their team a defined process, they create freedom for their team to execute well because their team wants to do well.
Right.
And they create freedom in their business by guaranteeing the results and giving themselves the ability to grow and expand. I kind of gave the example of automation earlier, but again, we work with businesses that maybe are afraid of automation or they're afraid of losing the human touch. They want to continue to write every email. They don't want to automate those. Understand that. And there's a way to balance automation because certainly one of the values that people have is the human touch and connection. And so we can automate the right way and the right things, but still get the benefit of that automation to extend that baseline that you get with processes. And a lot of times we work with companies that within visibility, they may have, and this is a natural part of the way companies grow, is business owners have grown and they've hit a problem where they've needed to add a new part of their business, add a new process, add a new team, and they need something to help organize that team. So maybe they build an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe they buy a new tool, and they wake up one day and they realize, I've got 10 different tools running my business. And to get the answer of how is my business running from A to Z, it takes my team a week to put the answer together. They don't have clear visibility at a glance on how their business is running. And their team doesn't have a clear idea on how they're measuring up to a benchmark within each part because everything's so disparate. The data is disconnected. So that's a frequent problem we see. And so we work to bring everything onto a single platform. We use Salesforce and HubSpot as those platforms. It bring everything onto a single platform so the business can continue to grow and scale.
Amazing. Okay, so great examples there for each. Why don't we unpack each of the principles a little bit deeper? Tell us more, firstly, then about process. What can you tell us about process and why is it one of the principles?
Well, first, Sam, I wish I could say process as cool as you. I can't. So I'm not gonna try. Process is critical. This is in order. Process comes first for a reason because it is the foundation. And you've got to have good processes to run a business well. Without good processes, you get a lot of variance in how the operations are executed within a business. When you have variance, it's difficult to repeat results. And let's say one day, if you're a business owner, you want to exit the business. That's one of the first things that companies look at, potential buyers look at, is how repeatable are your results? Because they want to guarantee you good results in the future. But if you don't have repeatable processes, repeatable results, if your systems and the way you operate are highly dependent on the internal knowledge of team members, then that's not an attractive model for a buyer. And that's not a growing, scalable business. And so it's important to take all this internal knowledge, all this expertise, really work with the team to build a system because it's the way you can repeat your success.
I suppose a follow-up question for that really would be, how do you know that your process is working, and to what percentage would you say a process is well defined and you're executing it well? Like, is it 70% of the time you win business or you do well, or is it like 100%? Like, what are the metrics? How do we define that?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of people, when they get here, they put up this barrier before they define their process because they're afraid they don't have all the details. And it's important to just get out there that, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Get started,
Right.
Get the process defined and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, you can always adjust it. But, if you work with your team and you get the results, I think it's this good enough to move on principle. If you get a process defined that covers 80% of your use case and you can manage the other 20%, I think that's great. You're going to iterate that and improve it. And really, if you think about a process, what is a process? It's a series of steps towards a goal. We're proactive. We think about how critical defining our process is. So we set aside time for it. That's the first step. It's just getting started. And then we think about the end goal. What do we want to accomplish? And so we think, okay, now that we have our goal identified, what are the steps to get there? And we work backwards and we think, what are the ideal steps along the path to get there? And we define it. We work with our team to fill in gaps and cover details. And that lets us to really define that good first draft of that process. And the reason this is important, the consistency that you get by defining this process and following through with it, consistency really compounds. Teams get better the more they work a process. And you're going to get 1% better every single day. And you're going to learn things along the way that's going to improve this process. So it's important to get it and just knock those edges off. Just round that process off because it's never going to be perfect. If you feel like you've got the perfect process outlined, you're missing something.
Right.
Missing a way to improve. So just get it out there and get started. The other reason I think it's really important too, and I mentioned this earlier, is it provides clear direction for your team. Process is a way to be kind to your team through clarity. Clarity is kindness. And having a really defined, prescriptive, detailed process so your team knows exactly how to execute, it's a breath of fresh air for them. They can come in, knock it out, and know that if they follow these steps 80, 85% of the time, it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
And the other 15%, let's say, they're going to get help with. And again, I can't emphasize enough partnering with your team, letting this process be collaborative, giving them the freedom to say, hey, this step 3 here, we're missing this detail. Or step 4, sometimes this doesn't quite work. And just continuing to update that process. And this really establishes a baseline and allows you to build your company to scale. It allows you to set up guarantee these results. And so we can then move on the rest of the framework towards automation and extend that baseline even more. But you've got to have that foundational layer.
Before we move on to the next principle, when it comes to working with our clients, what are the steps or the stages that we use to help our own clients create effective business processes?
I think it really starts with helping them identify what the end goal is and helping them work through this collaborative process of defining the steps. We help them figure out what the ideal behavior is to accomplish the goal, not just the steps itself along a business process. Think a sales process. When we think about a sales process, we think discovery call, build a proposal, show the proposal, close the deal. Okay. And that's your sales process, let's say, just in a nutshell. There are so many behaviors and things that you want the team to do ideally throughout that process that may not be just those single steps. There's certain emails you want to send. There's certain internal processes you want to send. There's certain ways you want to build documentation. That needs to be defined as well. And so we work with teams to pull all those details out and put them, again, in Salesforce or HubSpot, in a system that's highly customizable that can grow. And we put them in a place where the team can easily access them. And the other thing to think about, ideal process and ideal path, is data integrity, the availability of the data, and making sure that you capture everything you need in the process so that you can measure it later. This means that along the way, we're requiring data checkpoints for the team. If we go back to that sales process analogy, if it's someone wants to move, they say they've had the discovery call and they want to build a proposal. What do we need to know from the discovery call? What's the client's goal? What's their time frame? What's their budget? And requiring that data from the team And then what do we need to accomplish? How do we get started on this proposal side? Well, you may need a sales engineer. And so requiring a sales engineer to be assigned. You may need a template to begin to fill out. So requiring a template. And so these are what we would call entry criteria and exit criteria between stages.
Right.
And requiring this data allows you to cohesively accomplish the process well, but also allows you to capture data that you can report on later. In aggregate, understand how your process is running, where you may have like leaks in your process and in your pipeline, why you're winning and why you're losing. Those are critical things to know. Those are some of the ways we help. We pull out detail, we require data, we help them understand just behavioral portions, ideal path. And lastly, I think we identify bottlenecks. We help them identify constraints and really highlight those. Sometimes you're just going to have those. And we can use automation, we can use other parts of the framework to really bolster that and make those less of a risk. But you're going to have constraints. You're going to have bottlenecks. So let's identify them. Let's build tools around them to support that and help the business grow.
So I suppose a follow-up question would be, how often do you see clients or businesses in general that are trying to build technology on bad processes? And how often do you come in and help clients just to build better processes? And I suppose, is that a common occurrence?
We're blessed to work with clients that I would say half the time have really good processes and understand the need for a scalable system, and they just want to build something better. Or maybe they come to us and it's well-defined and they just need some help with best practice and building it the right way.
Right.
A lot of times, though, we work with clients that starting from scratch and maybe their process isn't as defined. Maybe it's in a spreadsheet. Maybe it's not laid out. I worked with a client one time, talented CEO, knew the process, had growth ambitions, but the way he was running the process was he had essentially, it was a sales process. He had a deal spreadsheet. He had this one spreadsheet where everybody was supposed to go in, enter the deals they were working on, follow up and give updates on the spreadsheet. And then he would look at what the results. Well, what he found was we got a lot of new deals and then we got a lot of closed deals. We didn't have anything in between. The team wasn't tracking anything in between because there was nothing for them to hold them accountable to track. Each salesperson had a different process in the way they went about it. So part of it was working with the sales team, working with him, identifying what is the actual process, setting it in stone. We built it in Salesforce for them. And then what that lets you do then is at any point you could see deals in stage 1, stage 3, stage 4, whatever it is. And he understood the full pipeline. Not only did he not have visibility into what the pipeline was, he didn't have visibility even to the accurate data. Like what we discovered, we got in there, we discovered that there were 7 different versions of the spreadsheet floating around.
Wow.
And so we were able to really standardize, get data in one place, define the process. And so some of our clients, good defined process, I'd say about half of them.
Right.
Some of them, we help them because they just built the plane as they've flown it. This is where business owners are. And they just need some help and some best practice and stepping back, getting that defined, and they're off to the races.
And a client, the example that you gave there, a client like that, I mean, the Scalable Business Framework is going to be absolutely transformative, isn't it? So super interesting. Well, look, let's move on to the next principle, which is automation. So why have you included this as one of the principles? Let's unpack automation.
Automation is it's a critical part of the framework that gets overlooked. It's an undervalued portion of the framework, but there's a lot of power in automation. And a lot of times when we talk about automation, people are a little hesitant because maybe they're thinking AI, maybe they're thinking an expensive integration with a system. But there's really simple things that you can do to automate within a business that adds a tremendous amount of benefit. But I think foundationally, you've got to have good process first. This is why automation is number 2.
Right.
So if you automate bad process, you get a lot more bad.
Yeah.
If you automate good process, you get a lot of good. Okay. And automation is a way to extend that baseline. We talked about that 80, 85% within processes. Automation is a way to extend that baseline and maybe get to 90%, 95%. It guarantees your results just a little bit further. And so it makes the process and the whole business operations just even more guaranteed.
So as you mentioned, automation built on bad processes increases the bad results. So how would you help a business to build effective automation that yields good results?
Yeah, I think really helping the business to see the vision first of what automation can do. I talked about the benefits and extending the baseline, but really, honestly, making it easy for their team is a huge benefit. We've just gone through this process of building a very detailed, descriptive diagram of what they need to do. Okay. And then that can seem pretty hard, or it could be pretty hard. And so helping them see, all right, let's go through this and figure out what can we automate to make it really easy for the team. We want to bless the team by making their work enjoyable so that they can continue to execute well, enjoy what they do. And most importantly, we can get more value out of them. This is where this balance between efficiency and effectiveness comes in. A lot of folks think about automation and they think about, we're just going to make everything more efficient, make things faster, get more things done in less time. And that's true. But the question is, the balance is, we want to build effectiveness. We want to build the ability for the team to put their time, focus on value-added activities that move the needle for the business. And automation is a huge part of that. We help focus the team's time. And so we take away a lot of this mundane, repeatable activity. We automate it so that the team can actually rise above. Again, go back to the analogy on your nervous system. We help them focus less on how many breaths they're taking and how much their heart's beating, and more on how much value they can add as a team. So we look at the process and we say, what are the constraints? What can we automate around those? What's repeatable? What can we guarantee the outcome on a lot of times? Where do we need additional data? What kind of communication do we need to automate? What behaviors do we need to automate? And so we take a look at that and we build it in. And it could be a workflow within Salesforce, a flow, or a workflow within HubSpot. It could be something as simple as an email template or a quote template. We work with folks they're typing every quote email. They're building every quote template every time. We can build processes and systems that allow that stuff to be, I would say like 95% of that's the same. And then we customize it a little bit for the client, and that saves their team so much time. So that's how we help businesses. We dive in, we look at what's repeatable, what can be pulled off the team's shoulders so they can continue to add more value.
And then how do you measure the impact of the automation on the company's efficiency, effectiveness, and ultimately their growth? Like, what are the metrics that you're looking at once this is implemented?
That's something that we're in the visibility side of the framework, we're going to measure a lot, but we want to find out what are the critical metrics for the business overall.
And that's defined in process?
That's defined in process. We'll come back to it in automation, but we want to know what are the critical metrics because we need to know what data to capture.
Yeah.
So we define that in process, and everything we do in automation should help us accomplish those metrics. It should help us honestly just get more revenue. And that's what businesses need. We could focus on a lot of things. We could focus on speed of the deal. We could focus on close rate. We could focus on a lot of stuff as a business, and all that's good. All that's really good. But we need more revenue. The life cycle of the deal, the length of time, the close rate are a function of us getting more revenue. Automation is one of those components. If we can move through the deal faster and have our team spend more of their time focusing on the right deals, that's going to move that revenue needle much more than just doing the same things over and over and over and spending a lot of our time on things that don't add value.
Michael, I've loved our conversation so far. It's been great to start learning about the Scalable Business Framework with you. For our listeners, join us for part 2 as we finish unpacking the framework and learn more about why this concept can be such a game changer for business owners and leaders. If you're interested in connecting with Michael to learn more about how you can use this model to build a scalable system and grow your business, his profile will be linked in the notes section of this episode. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find archived episodes at fastslowmotion.com/podcast.